Hey everybody. I just wanted to give a quick update on the channel and also to talk a little bit about my reaction here with She-Hulk. I've been receiving some, fun, really nice, really kind emails actually about the channel. And specifically, I've been receiving stuff about both the Twilight Zone content, when are you going to do something else with that, and also receiving some comments about like, oh, so what do you think about Thor: Love and Thunder, and what do you think about, just recently I had a couple of people ask me about what do you think about She-Hulk as well. So that being said, what I've been working on for a few months now is I'm working on splitting this off into two different channels because I do think that we do need a space where we can talk about the Twilight Zone. Whether it's the original series, from 1959, or even the later ones as well. I think it actually would be a really great thing to have a space where we could all talk about the Twilight Zone. I want to also branch off from this channel and start a new channel about heroism as well, because I'm finding a big problem in a lot of the channels today that talk about superhero content or hero content. I started this channel, Silver Linings, because I'm a big believer in trying to keep things positive, trying to find the good in things. And even for me, a positive person, that's becoming more difficult to a degree. And part of the reason why that's the case is because more than ever, the superhero content area has just become so polarized in terms of you have people on the extreme left who, are saying that everything that comes out that's a certain way is perfect, everything is wonderful, and they're unwilling to look at their own work and critique it meaningfully so that we can get the best out of it. But then you also have these channels too on like an extreme kind of the other end, the extreme kind of right end, who call everything, woke, garbage, trash, even when it's really not. Like there are just demonstrable reasons why it's not. And so I think many of us are just kind of left in the middle going, well, can't we just talk about it, from the perspective of the heroic narrative? Like, can't we just talk about it, about how good it is or how bad it is or ways that we can improve without feeling like we have to plant a flag in, that we're going to either be on one extreme position or the other? And so I want to develop a separate channel to talk about the heroic narrative and the importance of the heroic narrative because, I mean, it's one area that I study with my research in college is the heroic narrative and why it's so important, how it can bring courage to a lot of people. And I truly believe in that. And so I want to develop a space for those of us who have no interest in these extreme political poles of left and right. Like, I'm done with it. I don't know about you. You can let me know if you love it or not, but I'm just done with it. I'm done with clicking on a review video and hearing this is a 10 out of 10, there's nothing wrong with it, and kind of going, well, no, there are some things that are wrong with it that are not done well, that could be done better, and that doesn't mean that we hate it. And then clicking on another review video and hearing that it's a 1. It's a 1 out of 10. And how everything about it is terrible. Everything is like, come on, this is ridiculous now at this point. Really, it's becoming pretty ridiculous, honestly. So be on the lookout. I'm setting up these two channels to separate this out a little bit so that we can talk about the Twilight Zone and talk about the hero stuff from two different perspectives. I want to kind of separate that out. Now, in terms of the in terms of the She-Hulk review, my initial reaction here, I have not seen Thor: Love and Thunder yet because I promised that I was going to see it with my wife, and we both got sick in really weird, you know, weird opposite, moments, and so I wasn't able to actually check it out in the theater. So I just said, you know what, we'll just wait until it comes out on Disney Plus or something. But I will say this: if you've been watching my channel, if you've seen the videos that I've done where I've talked about Thor, you'll know that one of the movies, and I'm in the minority in this, that I dislike, that many people really love, is Ragnarok. I hated it. And I'm very open about why I dislike Ragnarok, and it has to do with that changing of Thor into this kind of bad stand-up comedian character. And when I do see Thor: Love and Thunder, because, people that I trust have told me all about it, but still, I want to do the right thing. I want to do the honorable thing. I want to wait until I see it before I actually talk about it. But people have told me, multiple people, that there's too much comedy. It's just, it's just become kind of a joke of itself. And that was my argument with Ragnarok, was that it took away, it ruined or perverted something that was incredibly unique to the MCU. It took that away. And that's a big deal. Every other character in the MCU at that point, has a history of being human. Steve Rogers, Tony Stark, Bruce Banner, they've all been human. But Thor was a god. And so it's not such an easy thing to throw that away, to throw that really interesting card that you could play away. So I will see it, Thor: Love and Thunder, and I'll talk about that at some point as well. All right? Okay, so my reactions here to She-Hulk, the first episode. Now, I will openly say I do remember reading some She-Hulk, when I was younger. Wasn't always my favorite thing. Quite honestly, I never really got into it that much. But I want to begin with a couple of positives here, actually. I was not familiar with the actress who played the main actress here, Walters, who played Walters. But I had heard that she was really good. And I mean, that came through. I thought that she put in quite a performance in terms of her energy levels, in terms of the way she delivered her lines, her comedic timing, like the timing between her and Ruffalo, or, Bruce Banner. I thought that was spot on, like really good, and could be very useful moving forward in the MCU if, she sticks with it and she's, in the MCU for the next couple of phases and stuff like that. I think that could be a unique character that they can actually explore later on, and do a lot more with. I also see a tremendous amount of potential here for the character and for the storyline. I don't know where it goes. I didn't have access to, to like the first 4 episodes like some review channels did. But I do see potential here for something great, and let me explain why. I picked up on the fact that she's very clear she does not want to be a hero. And I thought to myself, okay, that's an interesting storyline that you can do a lot with. This idea of, I have this power, I have this responsibility. What are you going to do with it? And Bruce keeps trying to tell her, you're a hero now. You have a responsibility with that amount of power. You have to do something with it. So, thanks a lot, man. Thanks for telling me. I appreciate it. Yeah. I'm just being told the audio is good now. Awesome. But Bruce keeps trying to tell her, you have a responsibility here to do something with those powers. And she keeps coming back and saying, no, I don't want that for me. I'm not a hero. I just want to be a lawyer, all that stuff. And toward the end of the episode, of course, if you saw it, spoiler alert, I suppose, I should probably say that or whatever. But toward the end of the episode, you have what I thought was a fairly rushed scene that, I'll be honest with you, I'm not sure I would have ended the first episode with that scene, because I thought it would have been a really good way to end on the note that she's going to try to stick to her guns. She does not want to be a hero. So for me, it would have made a little bit more sense, actually, if she stuck to her guns when Jamil, the actress, runs into the room. Was she Titania? Is that who she is, I think? Or Titania? It would have been more interesting to me from a narrative perspective, from a heroic narrative perspective, for Walters to simply say, no, I'm not doing it. And then have somebody maybe get hurt in the courtroom and, almost a kind of Peter Parker kind of situation, because this is kind of where they set it up for that, to almost have the situation where she then realizes, you know what? Could I have stopped that individual? Could I have done it? And if I could have done it, do I actually have a responsibility to use that power? I think that would have been, in some ways, a more captivating ending, so that she can start thinking about, do I have a responsibility of being this hero? And for me, that storyline is a very powerful one that they can explore further in the show. They can say, does everyone who has power have a responsibility to use it in the ways that others have used their powers? That's a legitimate human concern. So I could see exploring that idea and saying, let's let the character kind of organically figure out, does it make sense for Walters by the end of all of this to actually come to that conclusion that, you know what, I have to use my powers? Or maybe they go for it and say, no, it's not on her to do that. So I thought that was a positive. I thought that was a good storyline for it. So there's a lot of potential, interesting storyline there to use as well. The negatives of the show, though, the things that kind of got in the way of the narrative for me, the biggest one to me was this. And a lot of people have pointed this out in reviews and stuff like that. The ways in which she talks to Bruce on the island. I mean, I've got to be honest, it just doesn't make sense. Like, half the time, the things that she says, the emotional attachment that goes with her words, don't make sense in a lot of ways. And they don't make sense for one specific reason: the person with whom she's speaking. If you had Tony Stark on that island with her, if you had Steve Rogers, if you had Black Widow, if you had Hawkeye, if you had any other Avenger, any other person on that island with her, then I think like 75% of what she said, I think, would have been totally fine, would have made sense. And I'll give you the example that everyone's using. When Bruce says you have to learn to control your anger, learn to control your emotions, and she's telling Bruce Banner about how, because she's a woman, she has to deal with catcalls, with feeling unsafe, because at any moment, an average, male of average strength could possibly overpower her. And you think about that for a second. And here's the issue. Here's what I want to focus on with that. It's not so much that I have any issue with that. Like, that's actually a really interesting point, believe it or not. That's something that could have been a really great moment where Bruce says, you don't understand what it means to be vulnerable as a superhero, and thinking that at any moment your life can be put on the line and can be taken away from you. If Bruce had said that, and then she had said to him, Bruce, I know you mean well in telling me that, but let me tell you something about what I feel every day. I feel like there's a possibility in the back of my mind that this or this could happen. Then at least you could write it from the standpoint that she appreciates what Bruce is trying to do for her, and yet is also trying to tell him, listen, I have to deal with a bit of that kind of danger in my life always. And then Bruce could kind of say, okay, I see what you're saying. That makes sense. Let's build off of that. Instead, she turns it into an equation. You know, a less or greater than equation, and says that she's better than him at dealing with anger and frustration and feelings of, negativity. And again, if that's any other hero from the Avengers, save maybe Natasha, because she's got a pretty bad backstory too. If there's any other hero there, that line might work. But because it's Bruce Banner, because it's the guy who had the best line, I think I mentioned this in my video like years and years ago, I mentioned this. He had the best line in the entire Avengers film when he said, my secret is I'm always angry. Which to this day still gives me goosebumps in that moment when Bruce is walking toward the alien craft, and he just turns and says, I'm always angry. And then he turns into the Hulk and he smashes it. It's like, oh, it's a great scene, right? Then you have also the backstory, which, I'll be honest with you, I can't remember if they actually did talk about this. Did they talk about his father, the domestic abuse that he witnessed in the MCU? I don't remember. But in the Avengers film, the first one, he does talk about not suicidal ideation, but he talks about the fact that he put a gun in his mouth and pulled the trigger and was saved by the Hulk, essentially. And you think to yourself, Walters is talking about things that probably do manifest negatively in her mind, and that's fine. You can do that. But when she made it about who has it more, you invite people to critique the more part. Had she just simply said, I know, Bruce, I know you're trying to help me, but I actually do have an idea about what that feels like, people would not feel so inclined to bring up just how terrible of an existence Bruce Banner has had. And when you do put all of the things that Bruce Banner has had to deal with up against what she mentions, you I mean there's no comparison there. There's no comparison. And so that's the real issue we're dealing with here is a writing issue. That if you could write the character and the character's thoughts in a way that made more sense, I don't think people would have such a problem with what was trying to be said. It's just having the wherewithal to understand the character with whom she's speaking. That's Bruce Banner. Like, no one has suffered more than that dude. Like, what are you doing? Like, anyone else, if she was on the island with Thor, she could be like, Thor, you just don't get it. But to say that Bruce doesn't understand anger, that's the kind of stuff that drives me crazy. I don't get it. It becomes to a point where you have to ask, were people thinking about the character in the room when they wrote this? And so there are bona fide critiques to this show that they should have thought about, and none more than this idea of who she's speaking to on the island and the topic with which they're talking, anger. That is Bruce Banner's realm. I don't even care about them having fun with her, being better at yoga or whatever. I don't even care about that, to be honest with you. All of that stuff to me could just be wiped away as simply being them having, their little fun with the character, because that's who the character is trying to be. They want her to be kind of a little bit obnoxious, in your face. My beef with the show is it just didn't make sense to me. That never made sense. So why would you do it? And in that regard, I do think they have to be careful with this show, because it's very easy for the character to go from becoming, let's say, pig-headed, because she is certainly pig-headed, strong-willed, and even a little bit of that impish, obnoxious kind of figure, right, that she is. And there's nothing wrong with that. If that's who you want her to be, that's fine. I don't have a problem with that. They have to be careful, though, that she just simply becomes an unlikable figure. And that's where they started to go into. They started going into that realm of making her an unlikable figure. And I do think they've got to be careful about that. They just have to. I don't know. Let me know what do you think? You tell me. Did she? I thought the potential was there with the actress. The storyline, to me, yeah, the blood thing, I kind of like the transfusion origin story, honestly. I thought to me, that's an interesting story. The way they handled the blood in the car, I mean, okay, I will say this. I will say this. Just to weigh in on the whole Steve Rogers thing, maybe I'm old-fashioned, and maybe I just like Steve Rogers, Captain America. Again, this has to do with knowing who you're writing about, knowing the character. Would Steve Rogers want this conversation to be happening about his virginity? To me, there was nothing funny about that. To me, it was just, I don't know, cheap. it was just a cheap thing. And then I had read an article recently that said that, of all people, Kevin Feige actually not only okayed it personally, but provided the kind of framework for when it happened. So Kevin Feige told them, the writers, yeah, it happened, say that it happened in 1943, that kind of a thing. I don't I don't see the need for that. But I'm not prepared to to get rid of the whole show for that one reason. I just don't think that it's I just thought it was cheap. It's kind of a cheap thing that lessened the character of Steve Rogers, lessened who he was and who he wanted the world to what he wanted the world to see him as. I think it just cheapened it, quite honestly, and was unnecessary, really. All right. What did you think of the show? Let me know in the comments below. I'm going to keep you up to date on the channel kind of splitting off. I'll keep you up to date with that. But I am curious to hear, I mean, I would say if I had to give this a number of a scale of 1 to 10, I'd say it's about a 5 or a 6. 5 maybe, I don't know, maybe more toward the 5 side of things, because there were a lot of narrative, you know, continuity problems, I thought, but a lot of potential there as well for the character. So I'm not willing to just write the character off completely. Let me know what you think in the comments below. All right.